Welcome to Learning cEDH, the podcast dedicated to teaching you everything you need to know about competitive Commander. I'm your host, Matthew, and I'm joined once again by my co-host, Eric. And we went to the Cookout. It was really cool, and we're going to talk to you about it, what you missed out on over this past weekend, sort of our initial thoughts as people who have been outspoken about things we like and dislike about how cEDH tournaments have been ran and their structure and etc. And talking about our experiences at the event, what we saw, what the meta was looking like, how that lined up with our previous episodes where we've talked about what we expect to see at a big event like this. I would say this was probably the most competitive event. Like, it was packed with the big names you think of when you think of who's going to top 16 a cEDH tournament. This tournament had like 64 of those names, so not everybody could make it there.
I don't know what else to say. It was a really cool event. I know we're going to dive into like the specifics or different experiences and everything like that. So where do you want to start?
I guess let's just take like a bit of a general overview of how the event ran, sort of the logistics of what the event was like, just being there, playing through the games. And then we can take sort of a deeper dive into our games, to the decks we saw, what ended up top 16ing and winning, and do that into the second half.
All right. Do we have any more housekeeping before we get started?
We do, as always. We had to keep the lights on.
This video is brought to you by Inked Gaming. Inked has amazing artwork to choose from for playmats, mouse pads, bags, and other accessories, while also allowing you to upload your own custom artwork to show off your style. Check out the affiliate link in the description below to level up your look and support the channel.
Real quick, wanted to give a shout out to all my patrons over on Patreon. All the support that I get over there very directly allows me to get to do cool other things on the channel. If you enjoy this, consider liking, commenting, subscribing. Let us know down below what you want us to cover. Anything that you have about cEDH and learning cEDH, we're always willing to talk to you. You can check out the Discord where we're pretty much always hanging out. Again, any other questions you've got about cEDH, big or small, there's no such thing as a dumb question. Just let us know. And with all that being said, let's talk about the Cookout. It was just really cool. This is just going to be a place to kind of unload all the experiences that we had there.
So first, I want to talk about the placement of the hotel where we were at. It was right across the street from a Starbucks, which for me, which is like huge because I like to start my morning with like whether it's like pre or post workout with like a nice espresso. So nitro coffee was always on tap, ready to roll. And it was a big Starbucks too. Like, it was huge. It had plenty of room. So it was really nice. And you're also right there, literally across the street from like a Publix grocery store. So, any of your like auxiliary things you need, like water, snacks, whatever, it's right there. And then the sushi house that was right across the street. Oh my gosh. I was shocked of how good it was. It was very authentic. I saw some other Magic players there. I wasn't sure if they were playing in the event, but then they started talking about Blue Farm, and I was like, yeah, they're Magic players. That was, again, just excellent to just have right across the street. And then there was some other places there that, people could eat. I know, like, there were some people that were really, like, chopping the bits to get to Waffle House. I am not an awful waffle kind of guy, so not really my jam, but,
And it definitely was, as someone who went there, that was maybe my worst Waffle House experience. But it was right, like, the whole event was themed around Waffle House, oddly. Yeah. And then the hotel shared a parking lot with Waffle. Like, it was just right there. So we had to give it a shot.
Yeah, just the accessibility to anything. And then, because we'll be jumping more into Magic, this is more of like the things outside of Magic. We went to this pizza place. It was not too far away. It was a Neapolitan style pizza place. It was top 2 all time. It was the best Neapolitan style pizza I've ever had. It was phenomenal. And it was just clean, fresh. Did the margarita pizza with buffalo mozzarella. That was like the one real bad thing I had all weekend. So it was pretty good. I really enjoyed it. So it was, my friends enjoyed it. It was especially after day 2. Day 1. And so it was like a really nice way to, eat something, a little bit of fun and, whatever. But the hotel, had a gym. I worked out like every day and had the ability to like train and still like, go play Magic. So it was like had everything into one. So it was pretty fun. Like I overall had a really like kind of flawless checking into the hotel. I got early check-in at 12. So it was the event was ran pretty like the from the hotel perspective, it was pretty easy. So
Compared, yeah, I'm just comparing your experience to mine, which was just one of the wildest weekends I've ever had of just outrageous scenarios, like taking my pizza to go and being given a used pizza box that was covered in toppings.
we did not go to the same pizza
Yes, I
place.
know.
Just
Different pizza places.
yeah, different pizza places. So, well, I mean, they're just being resourceful, and
Yeah,
I really
exactly.
appreciate anybody trying to get that 2-for-1 value on a pizza box. So,
Between that, dealing with Atlanta drivers and Atlanta weather, which a lot of people who came in might have not been used to, it gets hot down here in the South and very
yeah,
humid.
it's like the favorite part about trips is my age group, like either everyone's married or engaged, they got kids. So it's really hard for all of us to get together. Like that's not just like, hey, hanging out on like a Saturday and gaming, but actually go on like a trip because they have their own responsibilities, like I have mine. And it was really nice just to spend time with everybody in that scenario. And as much as it was fun, it was really great because Matt and I got to see each other for the first time in real life. And that
Yes.
was really cool. So and it felt like seriously, it felt like I've known you just as long as we've been talking to like through Discord and like, other social media platforms. So it was like totally comfortable.
Mm.
And that was a really sweet part. And on top of that is just meeting people that we have both interacted with from a social media distance.
Yeah, that was really sick. And like getting to meet up with people that you've like talked to and been sort of friends with online is really cool. And then like big thing for me that was just like so weird. I feel like I just like dissociated out the entire event because it was just like so much going on. My games are going so poorly. And then also like I can't go like 30 minutes or so without hearing like, oh, you're Lemora's cards. I love your channel, blah, blah, blah. I watched Learn to Play, I listened to Learning CDH. Like the very first thing I tweeted this, and people won't believe me, but it happened, I promise, was I show up to the event. We go to we're looking for the where everybody's playing at, and it's someone sitting at the bar. It just points at me and is like, best CDH channel, your takes are always right. And it was just like a dreamed up scenario of what I hope all my fan interactions would be. It's just being told that all my hot takes are correct. But yeah, it was really cool. I mostly went like we've talked about like attending from like a competitive perspective and what we expect to see and how we want to do well, blah blah blah. But like I really went to just get to do that. Like this is my first Magic events, like like a larger scale one that I got to go to, and especially as like since making videos, like one of the first Magic things I've really done. And so being able to like go somewhere where people just recognize me and just getting to like meet up with people who I've like had on my streams or who I've done videos with, because it turns out like most of the Learn to Play people were just at the event. Like Shauna's there, Lauren's there, Helenium, like, and then the people who I want to do future videos with. Like it's either the people I've already done them with or the people like Freedom Waffle who I've got to associate with but haven't done like a Learn to Play with yet. Just like super cool people, super good players, and it's just, yeah, it's a lot of fun. Even though like you kind of want to just show up and hang out, but it is also like, yeah, you got to do like 16 hours of playing Magic and fit the rest in between that. No issues at all with how the event was ran whatsoever.
No,
Also on top of that, like it was super smooth. Getting your seating and stuff, that element of like you just look on there. We don't have to determine turn order. We just find your table number, sit down, you're ready to go. No issues with any of that. Like all the judges I didn't have that many judge interactions, but they all were just like, hey, I actually don't know. Let me find somebody who does, blah, blah, blah. We didn't get any like weird rulings, any of that. It was just people being responsive, courteous, and it all went really smoothly from my perspective.
So from just the judge's perspective, the judging was great. Like I really enjoyed how strong of a presence the head judge was,
Yeah.
and also the supporting staff there. Their judges were great. I had no issues with. I love the way. I apologize. I don't know their name, but there was one particular judge that I interacted with twice, and they were just. It was just really interesting, like the way I explained the situation. It was like I'll give the listeners an example. There was like a Ristic study out. I just drew a docen. I figured my opponent probably had like a tutor or something in response. to me casting Docen, but I cast the Docen. I put it on the stack. So just something that, for most players to know, like it's not your responsibility to like trigger an opponent's Rhystic Study. Like just cast your spell. It's their card. It triggers it's their responsibility. So they triggered the Rhystic Study, and instead of casting their tutor in response to their trigger, they asked me, "Do you pay the 1?" And I said, "No." Docen. Then they try to cast a Vamp Tutor in response. It doesn't work the way they think it's going to do because the trigger has already resolved. And so Docen got to resolve. And then, combo shenanigans ensued after that. I cast a Food Chain and, did the thing, but we can get more on that later. But just those kind of things. And then when I called the judge to help explain that to the player, they were phenomenal about it. They were really nice. They weren't trying to get you. Most people forget that judges, and everyone's had a poor judge experience before because guess what? Judges are humans. But these judges were like, there was no ego. There was nothing like that. They were phenomenal. So really just appreciate the ability to communicate with the judges. And there was the only thing that was mild communication error was like the tokens and dice situation, because like I left all my like mana tracker style like things with dice. Oh, like I didn't bring it with me because I knew we couldn't use dice on mana itself, because obviously mana is not a physical manifestation of a card. It's something that you need to keep track of, like whether it's paper or multiple tokens. I didn't have like 10 red mana symbol, tokens or whatever. And then like we got into a game to where like nobody had anything. So there we just all agreed, like we just used the dice anyways, because like I was going through like a storm turn. And I was like, I don't have like 30 black mana trackers. And I was like, I could do it on paper. And they're like, it's just going to take longer. And Dockside was already, making like 5 or 6 or something crazy like that. So it wasn't even like a thing. But outside of that, it was, that's such a small, minor thing. Note to self, just have like 20 of everything. Like when you go, it makes it a lot easier. But you can like track like a dice on like a treasure because it makes it a little bit easier that way. Which again, I thought is because, a treasure is like a physical card.
I'm still confused almost on like if you had a mana token, right? Because even like you look at the Pro Tour, they'll have a mana token of like, this is green mana, and they'll put dice on it. And I didn't know if you were still allowed to do that or not. Like as someone, I was just reaching for my playmat. I have built-in mana trackers in my beautiful Lemora's Cards playmat.
That you can buy, by the way.
That you could theoretically buy, but I don't have any to sell you currently.
Because they were such a hot item, they sold out. So get it now. Message Matt.
I do
try to get you one.
Quite cool in my perspective. It might be backwards for you guys. But yeah, I have mana trackers built in. I was like, cool. I just need dice, and then it's very easy to track mana. I didn't do much storming because you kind of have to have successful games in order for that. But in Redemption, I did. But everyone was very chill in Redemption. So at that point, most people were just like, any way you can represent the mana, like whatever, we really don't care. And even in some of my regular games, by the end, they were just like, a lot of players were just saying like, just represent your mana however, and then like whatever, we'll get through it, we can understand it. Because I think that's the thing that's more key, is just like everyone understands what the current game state is. Yeah, that, and then the communication on Redemption, which for those of you who didn't attend, was a side event they ran on day 2 with a 64 player cap. Essentially, it was, hey, if you're not making it in a top 16, but you want to stick around and play some games and have a way to compete still, you can enter this side event, which didn't necessarily have, it didn't have like a normal bracket. It was 3 Swiss rounds, and you basically got a payout based on your performance. So if you got 3 wins, you got the most money. 2 wins and a draw, you got a little bit less money. 2 wins, and a loss, a little bit less money. So it's basically just like, come play 3 games. You can get a payout if you do well. It seemed like it was maybe a little thrown together, at least the way it was communicated. Like it was only brought up late into day 1, and the details weren't really clear until like after a round or 2 on day 2. But it ended up, they cleared it up and everybody kind of knew what was going on. So maybe like going through that a little bit more cleanly, and it might have been like by the end of day 1, they realized like, a lot of people don't have good standings and everybody's going to leave tomorrow. Like, I really like them doing the event, or any sort of side event that you can keep players engaged and not have them just be like, let's try to beat the traffic or just get out of here early. Like just keep people playing in the same room and just having fun, and supporting, your company or your vendors. And all of that is really good. So hopefully they do things like that in the future and just like maybe showcase them a little bit better, have the details like really cleanly laid out like in the Discord day of. That's about it in terms of logistical things that I noticed that were maybe like slight issues or could be improved.
Yeah, so somebody mentioned this. They were talking about like getting the like booking room package thing like extended to like a Sunday night.
Mm,
Typically, if you actually just contact when you go and you call your, like your hotel, they'll extend that to you. I've done it before in other like Magic events and stuff or other those type of things. They'll typically extend that to you at that rate price because most people do check. A lot of people do check out on like a Sunday morning.
mm,
So they're not really like they might as well get you there for one more night. You know, normally you wouldn't be there because like not many people come in and check in on a Monday morning. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Does that make sense? Like, so you might as well get them. And then by that, there might be some value in that because now you have more people staying. So you can run like side events later on, you
Mm.
know, and that's, you know,
It did line
the
up kind of
only,
strangely where like checkout time was like in the middle of a round, was like in the middle of the first round. So that worked really weird where like the round also started slightly earlier. I think the first one, at least on the way they had it on the docket, I think there ended up being a player meeting instead. But like the way it lined up was just like I'm gonna have to wake up at 8 o'clock, pack all my stuff up, throw it in the car, then go check out, and then come down and play the first game so that I can make sure that I can check out or whatever on time. But I think it ended up just a lot of people didn't check out on time, and so the hotel had to remind people like, yeah, you got to check out.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, you actively have to check out, which is weird because a lot, like, I've stayed at, like, this is the first hotel I've stayed at in several years where you have to go to the front to check out. Normally, you just leave your room. Now,
mm,
like, you just leave your keys in your room and you just go do your thing, or you can check in and out on an app, you know, and that's makes things like a lot more streamlined. But, you know, I mean, I didn't mind it. It was fine. I mean, feels like it didn't bother me at all. The only thing that was the thing that and this has nothing to do with eminence. This is just like player like responsibility or whatever you want to call it. But like they announced like, hey, if you want to drop now, you do it now.
mm,
So then they could go and do the pairings for the rounds. And then we had people after they did the pairings for the rounds not show up to their match. And
yeah,
that was actually kind of frustrating because you know, a lot of decks are, you know, like decks are designed like to do their thing based on like cards in their deck, like, or there was 2 player pods and, you know, people's battle bond like commander lands don't work. They just functionally don't work in those games.
yeah.
They're ETB tap lands.
Like really messes with
Um,
Timnas and Croms and Ristics and Mystic. Like the game is really
sure.
different when players aren't there.
Yeah, and so CDH is really interesting in this regard. Like you typically start shuffling and trying to resolve your mulligans ASAP to save time. Like obviously, like you're supposed to technically go in like a particular certain order or whatever, but that's impossible. That's just not like a legitimate thing. And I
Especially in
will say
timed
for
rounds.
yeah, and most I will say most times, like typically, like if like player one kind of does, like if they go ahead and like shuffle, say keep or mulligan, then like the players kind of go in sequence, and it's not that big of a deal, and there's not like really that much time lost on the clock. I'm not ultra anal about that type of stuff, but you know, we're sitting there trying to resolve our mulligans, and like our fourth player doesn't show up, and I'm like keeping like a hand that's based on 4 players, you know, and they don't even show up. And then, you know, it's that player's prerogative, I guess, whether or not they want to show up. But that's not really how, like, I don't know. That was just that was just kind of an inconvenience thing. I know some people had to deal with a lot of 3 player pods. Kind of makes it hard on Tivit to win in that
Yeah.
regard. I guess, you know, you actually have to, you know, you can't
They have
just
to play the game.
they actually
Actually.
have to play the game and get a Thought Oracle combo. Who'd have thought? But
Hard life.
um
Hard life.
yeah, hard life. Still got a 3 mana A plus B or a 4 mana A plus B. Really struggling there, you know. But that has nothing to do with Eminence. They can't control what people do. But outside of that, like from Eminence's perspective, and I want to make sure like people clip this. It was an awesome end player event. I personally spoke to some of the staff, especially Mike, Zane, and I just wanted to give them my kudos to that because it was a great one. I thought coverage was very good. I thought Scoots and Ashani killed it in the booth. I thought they did really good choice interviews. I thought that Amped Gaming did a great job on floor coverage. I thought that was a big win. So for me as a whole, if I had to really rate this, I mean, this is like A plus. Like
Mm.
if you want to be fair, just say A, so they can still have room to strive up and grow. But it was A plus. I thought that right there was fantastic. I really really enjoyed the event. I enjoyed the smoothness of the structure. It kind of reminded me a lot of when like Star City was like really like in tune with their events. I haven't been to one in a little bit, but they were just ultra smooth. And when you got people who are just making things happen like that, and they're giving up not playing Magic to run the events, that's a big win for them. They did a very good job with that.
And we do have to just keeping score on the internet. We have to acknowledge that like cool things happen at this event and good improvements happen, and we suggested them in a video we did. So you guys are all welcome that we made the the videos that we did, because that's how you get better. Also, if you did have the perception that like, oh, we're being really hard on them and no matter what they do, blah blah blah, we're gonna tear them apart for it, and then this is us saying like, hey, we see that we suggested that you implement these things to improve your events and your coverage, and then you did, and so I think you did a really good job.
And whether or not that came from us,
Yeah.
regardless, but it was just one of those things that, like, kind of like how I said Star City was going to start doing cEDH, and then people laugh. People were like, "That'll never happen," and then that's weirdly weird because it's like they did it.
And I think also like people who watch this event now, I haven't been able to go back and like rewatch a lot of the coverage yet, but I'm gonna assume between like the really good floor coverage you talked about from Amp Gaming, the improvements to the casting and such, like people will see this event and get a better idea of how well these events are ran and how they should really try to get out to one of them. I think if you see, especially the floor interviews, like it really shows that this is like it's not just a table of four players trying to get the best they can out of their deck and all they care about is winning. There's just like a lot of people at these events circling around who are losing and having a great time, or who are just happy to get to be there with like their friends and who are learning as they go. Like mine and Eric's interviews were both saying like, oh well, this was a surprising part of the game. I didn't expect this going into the pods, blah, blah, blah. And getting to hear that and not just, what was the feature matches result? And that's what we're going off of. Like that being the end sort of the coverage. It really opens up the event and kind of shows like, hey, this is like, a whole thing that's happening. You should try to come to the next one if you can.
Yeah, I would absolutely like to go to, what is it? Night of Festivals. Is that what it's called?
Festival of Nights,
Festival
maybe.
night?
That night, that makes more sense, but I don't know the name.
Everybody I met was like really nice. And, like Matt's like super recognizable. He's got the flow going on. And I'm just like I was like a guy working out in the gym. It was just really funny. But that's enough of like the silly, like kind of precursors to the tournament and in the game tournaments. But I do just want to make sure that like anybody that I interacted with, I really appreciate, like, especially like people who support the channel. That was really cool. I just appreciate that. That was pretty humbling because we didn't even like, I just like wore regular clothes. I'm not there like, representing the channel. That's my fault for being a scrub.
I also did a very poor job. Other than my playmat, I did a very poor job of advertising like, hey, I am Matthew from Lemora's Cards. Walk up to me and buy merchandise or something. So I have no merch to sell you.
And I was like just kind of locked in on the tournament. I'm very much like, I really don't like, normally I don't even have my phone on me when I like play Magic, but because standings and stuff
Yeah, you
or
kinda
and
have
brackets
to.
are on your phone now. So that was really cool. Just again, like I said, it was fun overall. Meeting some of the people that like, just like how easy some people were to talk to, like Freedom Waffle, that was just ultra easy. Always asked how I did in my rounds. Zane, ultra easy to talk to. I was really pumped to meet Connor. Shout out to Connor. Just, Connor and I have interacted quite a bit in the Corval like Discord server and like another server, and just meeting those people and just breaking those barriers and just realizing like, hey, we are literally all just humans. It doesn't matter who you work for or what you do. We're just all here for the same reason. That's to have a good time. So I think that's like the most important part. And I said in my interview, it's the gathering. And I think that's what was really nice to get back to.
Yeah, definitely big shout out to people who were like, came up to me and were like very supportive of the channel. Like again, like Gold Sabertooth, Freedom Waffle, Lauren or MTG Hot Dog, all had very kind things to say.
That was nice.
Yeah. So that was all really nice. But you guys probably want to hear about the gritty details of the cookout and the games and what the meta was looking like. We talked about in our last episode what we sort of expected to see, where we're like, oh, there's going to be a bunch of Tivit and there's probably going to be Blue Farm and Najila. And yeah, there was. there was.
Yeah.
There was a lot of that. Probably the thing, at least in the Swiss rounds, I don't know about as much in the top 16. The experience that a lot of people had in the Swiss rounds was that this was a really, really fast meta and that people were just going off. The games were very short or had very few turns, and they were a lot of just like hot draws, basically, like people mulliganing really aggressively or properly, and then the players who weren't or who kept sort of like slower proactive hands were just like losing games they should lose pretty much. And like people were just really going off. Decks that had very explosive ability to win we're doing it. Would you say that's pretty accurate to your experience there?
Yeah. So out of 7 rounds, outside of one match, every game ended on like an average of turn 3. Like I seriously, I think I wrote it down. I think it's like, it might be 2.8. It's either 2.8 or 3.1 the turn that the game ended.
Mhm.
And it was wild. And even like the game that ended up going slow, if in my opinion, if the proper card would have gotten countered, the game could have ended like way faster than that. In just terms of the speed of the format, like it was fast. And like I can't complain. Like I said, like if you've talked to me about the deck, I always pretty much had like a turn 3 presentation of some form of win or like ad nauseum. So it was not like, I mean, I guess you just got to go to turn 2,
Yeah.
But there was very little like counterspell interaction outside of like my first match, and they had like 2 or 3 pieces of interaction for me. Of course, I laughed. That was one of those things of like it felt like some of like a lot of the times my deck didn't get a chance to even develop. Like even in my storm turns that I like won, like I didn't have a chance to like dig for like certain things. Like I didn't see defense grid at all. I never saw a red blast, a pyroblast, a veil of summer, an autumn's veil at all. Like outside of like had autumn's veil my lightning bolt to kill a devoted druid because like one of the players was threatening to like go off with their devoted druid like swift configuration. But like in terms of like me actively like using those cards as protection pieces, just never happened. It was just like one of those things. It's basically like mulligan for a powerful payoff, whether I'm casting a turn 2 dockside or a 1 ring or had a ran necro, a wheel, or an ad nauseam. Just anything like that. That's just kind of how the games felt. And also probably not respect my opponents. That's actually what I made a couple of micro decisions that were just like where I played around like mind break trap or something like that, because I didn't want to just give them like a free mind break trap or anything like that. And, like not jamming out a Grim Monolith to get the 1 extra colorless or something like that, which in the end, I should have just have like pushed.
Mhm.
Like, and that could have been the like difference of some of those games. But overall, like the games are really fast. I know we saw some games like stall out. That's just a natural progression of every Magic game. You're gonna not have every game fast, but it was pretty wild. Even like some of the games that like my friends played, who all were running kind of like slower decks, like Tim Najeska or like Green White Sisse or something like that. A lot of their games were like outside of a few, they were pretty fast too. The biggest shocker was I thought like I would have saw a lot more Atraxa. I actually didn't see
Won.
Atraxa. There was only one Atraxa deck in the whole tournament. I only played against Tibet once. I only played against Blue Farm once. So I'd played against 0 Nagilas. I don't like it was pretty interesting. It was an interesting and again, I know top 16 kind of shook out to be like a lot of the suspect decks that we are like the normal decks we kind of see.
It was, and this is relative to like basically like the stats that we've seen in game analysis and like people's best attempts to try to figure out the format. It's really close to like a turn 5 format based on what we usually would hear and where it about lands on. And yeah, it was, I want to say my slowest game was maybe we might have got to turn 5, maybe in some of the slower games. I definitely didn't have a game go much longer than that. And there were a lot of like turn 2, turn 3 win attempts.
What'd you play, Matt?
Okay, we don't have to talk about it. No, I know. So I foolishly, very foolishly, although I didn't think so at the time, but kind of foolishly. I swapped to blue farm, like I said I might do. Mostly because wanting white cards, but importantly, white cards don't matter if your opponents don't interact, because that's kind of their best thing, right? Is being able to silence, being able to grant abolisher. Like that is the strength of white. And if your opponents don't interact, white is about worthless, to be honest. Other than like an Esper Sentinel drawing you some cards, right? And yeah, my opponents didn't interact. So, and like Eric said, I definitely experienced the inability to set up in games that are going to, turn 3 on average. It's pretty tough to be like, get out a Timna, get out a Crom, hide behind a Ristic or Mystic, draw some cards when the games are going that quickly. And so like I often really found keeping those sort of like responsible hands of a little bit of acceleration, 1 to 2 pieces of interaction, and then maybe the ability to develop an engine or just like a fast engine that could come down like a Ristic or like a turn 1 Timner or Crom often just didn't work very well, because respecting your opponents, again, this is only in our experience of these matches, didn't really work very well. And barring, I believe, only my first game, which had like Comedian in it, so you'd expect him to be very good in those scenarios of like stopping the opponent from winning. That was like the only game in my first pod with Ian and then an Ashaya player able to kind of put together an endurance out of nowhere to try to sort of stop something. That was the only game I believe I had where a player other than myself attempted to stop a win. And then every other game was like, I try to stop a win. I'm the only one who can. The other the person going for it has one more piece of interaction. And then that's the game. And then I'm just looking at 2 other players, shocked Pikachu face, wondering why they kept 7.
Yeah. So this was the interesting part. And I'm not going to like give specific rounds or anything like that, because, I don't know what was in these players' heads or whatever, but I will say, like, as soon as like I put my commander on the like table, everybody was like, "Oh, here's Corvold," and there's like a Tivit on there's like Tivit on like Tivit, and then like a Dawn Waker. I'm assuming it was Dawn Waker. I really didn't get to see a lot of it. Might have been like an evolution variant, but it was whatever that pile was. So, and then I'm like, okay. And so for me, I thought Corvold was a great choice because it actually performed like relatively well based on what I thought. Because Corvold doesn't really put up a lot of standings. Corvold's also not like ultra representative in the tournament scene at all. Like it's had a couple of top 16s as of recently, which has been called like really nice. But like most people just like, okay, you interact with Corvold like once and then you just stop what they do. And that's just like not how like the deck's designed. Specifically, if you actually break the like my particular build down, it's got like a lot of like layered combos and ability and multiple A plus Bs that happen to kind of go together. And then I went on the One Ring for this event specifically because in the games where Dockside is very respected or just happens to not line up with draws, I don't want my deck to not function. So like I played the One Ring and the One Ring was like very good my first round. Like people were not ready for it. So now I'm flushed with like cards. So if the game gets longer, then it's good. It's just that like everybody was already presenting a win. Like it was wild. Like a green white deck pretty much would have set up for a win on their third turn or whatever. And then the Malcolm Tana player like ripped a Jewel Lotus off of a Ponder like in seat 1 on turn 1, and I was like, kept a 1-lander, hit it, got it, and then Magda just had it, and then so like I presented like I had like a Treasure Storm draw, and then they had two pieces of interaction. Of course, they had a Fluster Storm and a Mind Break Trap. Regular counter spells wouldn't do. They just had it was those exact ones. And drawing like 10 cards, I like drew like 10 to 8 cards, and any of those was never like Veil, Autumn's Veil, like, any of the things that could have just stopped it, Docent, Defense Grid, whatever. There was just like where people like really, really like over like respected what the deck could do, which is shocking in a way. And like I had a player who had the potential to spell snare a turn 2 Grim Monolith from the Tivit player in seat 1. They're in seat 4. And they chose not to because, we don't know if they have it or not. So they're literally representing a turn 3 Tivit. And they're in seat 1. So they are way ahead of everybody. And I turned 1 Imperial Sealed. So I guess they just assumed I got Dockside, which is fair because I did, because it's a Tivit match and there's going to be lots of artifacts and enchantments on the battlefield. And like my Dockside coming down literally was like going to just play a Corvold and have like a treasure left over or two. and they like spell snared my dockside opposed to the Grim Monolith. I just don't understand that logic. Like, I really don't. Like, and of course, like they didn't want to like converse or anything like that. They just kind of like shelled up and didn't want to interact with, any of my like conversation. And of course, like then Tivit came down on turn 3. And then it was unfortunate because it really put all the player on the Elsha player to have to be the only one to ever really interact with Tivit. And this player here also kept a 0 land Chrome Mox hand. And then they ended up winning because all like the game just kind of grinded down to a halt. And like I just didn't see a reanimation spell at all in any of my draws or even actively try to draw additional cards. Kind of frustrating a little bit. And it was just like I also casted like 3 to 4 pieces of interaction with the Tivit player and other people. And I had just as much interaction as the 3 other blue decks. And again, that was just kind of like one of those weird like draw setups. And in that one, I should have just like got the One Ring opposed to a dockside. But at the same time, I'm like, that's just really poor threat assessment where you think Corvold in seat 3 is a bigger threat than a seat 1 Tivit. Like that just makes no sense. Because when you look at the deck and how those decks scale in power and stuff, like that, it's not even close to me. Like
It's almost more an assessment of, which I think is incorrect to do in that scenario, of analyzing like the power of the 2 cards that are presented and not what they mean for the game. So like in that scenario, Grim Monolith means Tivit is coming down. Dockside means Corvold is coming down. But one of those things is not like Tivit is Corvold is scary in a sort of unknown way of like, okay, Corvold has the potential to just go off. But Tivit is like scary in a very known way of like, he will be able to go Tivit and potentially just slam time Civ and win this game immediately.
And honestly, I feel like that player should have won the game. Just because of the way the game texture was, because I was virtually almost a non-factor outside of a few interaction pieces. And then this player literally sat and did nothing for the entire game and ended up landing a Heuristic Study like late in the game and ended up winning. Because these players too had to like battle each other out. The Elsha player versus the Tivit player for the most part. And then the only thing that I had set up was like a Goblin Engineer line, which I was like really excited about because I was going to get under a Graph Digger's Cage with it on a Curse Mirror. And then Toxic Deluge just came down and like that was pretty frustrating on that regard, just mostly just because like I finally like dug my way into like a semblance of something. And it's just one of those things of where it was like a really weird like game. And then it was pretty funny that the blue player played very parasitic and they're the ones who like ended up benefiting off of it. It was one of those things where again, like where I sit down at a table, and it was a great pod. Like the next pod I'm talking about, they were awesome. They were so much fun to play. They were really chill. And then one of the players, she was like, just like, okay, there's Corvold at the table. We all need to make sure that this person like doesn't do anything. And like I jammed basically like 3 tutors down there. I had to jam like 3 tutors and was able to prevail and actually prevailed through a Douthie Woodwalker, which was pretty sweet because like I kind of played silly and was like, oh man, I'll cast this Entomb. Oh no, Douthie. And they're like, yeah, sure, whatever. And I wouldn't put Squee in the exile. I just wanted the Entomb to resolve because I knew I was going to get a food chain and try to win from there. But it was pretty good. Like I said, can't complain again. The power level of the deck as a whole, it did exactly what I wanted to do. I will say though, and I hate to be the seat order police on this one, but I was seat 333, 4-1. That was day 1. Day 2, I was like, oh, I was seat 4, and then like seat 3, whatever. And I was just like, and then it's really tough to like, because nobody wants to believe you like when you're the Adnaz dockside guy. But like just me like legitimately like, hey, like Rogsai is going to be presenting like a Thoracle combo, ad nauseam, whatever. Like if you'd crack your Lotus Petal to trigger my Mayhem Devil to like kill the Rogsai or the Rogsai, it's just one card now to kill the Rograk equipped with the Paradise Mantle, it would actually benefit us because it ended up being a 3-player pod at the last round, even though we were at table 10 or whatever. They were on blue farm, so it actually behooves them to slow the game down. They didn't. Sure enough, Thoughts Oracle combo exacts enough mana, got us. Even try to table talk somebody out of an ad nauseum of just like, hey, if you can't do anything, you should keep going on your ad nauseum to maybe like find your win. Or if you die to the ad nauseum, then you don't necessarily die in the match because the match potentially could be to a draw, but leaving your artifacts and enchantments on the battlefield just for the rock side player to untap and cast dockside just really is like a feels bad. Also, I have a dockside in my hand. The table knows I have a dockside in my hand. And I'm actively giving advice against my own dockside just for the health of the table. Again, nobody wanted to listen. Sure enough, exact like enough to dockside ad nauseum, do the whole thing, we lose. So things like that were really kind of frustrating. I punted one of my matches. I had it won and just kind of overthought it, and just didn't abrupt decay first when I should have, and just kind of derped. And even realized that I didn't even need to worry about Graph Digger's Cage because I had a Saw and Half combo like through a Graph Digger's Cage. Like, so I could have just went from there and I just didn't think about it. I was too worried about, I was like the Mystic Remora beside me versus just like, okay, I just need to like abrupt decay this, jam a dose and go from there. A play that I've probably done like a blue million times, but that's tournament magic and no one's perfect in tournament magic. I surely wasn't. And that was kind of the nicest thing. It really allowed me to knock off the competitive rust because I don't know, Matt, did you have like any experiences where like you just felt like out of sync or you're not like as smooth as you are and.
I guess I lost a bunch. So, um, so I definitely game one. So this is literally like, this is my second in-person cEDH tournament. The other one was like a local. And then I've never even been to like any sort of larger Magic tournament, period. So like, this is my first tournament with this many people, period. Like more than 64 people. I guess I was a bit nervous at the start. Game one is the only game I can definitively say that I had all the information that I needed and should have pushed for a win and didn't. And I had a win. I had just like a hand with 1,000,000 mana and then ending on like a Wishclaw Talisman to get whatever. And I pretty well know that there's no ability to interact with what I'm doing, but didn't think through what we knew because like we knew a player had a Mystic Remora out. We knew their library because it had been shuffled in. They had went for Thoracle. Endurance hit them. They didn't win. Their library was 6 cards or something. We knew the library.
Wait, real quick. So sorry. Who won that game?
Not the Endurance player.
That's the most important part, folks.
Not the Endurance
and that's
player.
The show, everybody.
Yeah. That was a really interesting play where they did it was like the Ashaya who had turn 0 Leyline of Abundance and then played was able to cast their Ashaya on 2 and then had exactly enough mana to Summoner's Pact, 4 Endurance, pay for the Pact with Ashaya tapping for 2 and then their land with a Wild Growth on it. And then then just passing the turn, tapped out, unable to do anything and losing. So I basically had a win and was just slightly worried that was thinking that the Najila player had a piece of interaction in their library that they were going to draw into. But if I had really paid attention to the endurance pile, I would have known that they didn't. And then was slightly worried to go for a win attempt and give out a Wishclaw Talisman. And because Ian's behind me, and I don't think he has interaction, but I believe he could have still represented. Did he have potentially Mindbreak Trap? I think there was something in my mind that wouldn't have answered the win attempt that we had to scramble for, but could potentially answer what I'm going for as a piece of interaction. So I was a little worried that would happen. I give out the Wishclaw Talisman or whatever. But again, as I would learn throughout the rest of the event, you kind of just need to jam when we're playing in these games specifically. Just go for it. And especially the amount of information I had, I should have went for it. But then I was like, okay, we'll take it in the next one. But then honestly, most of the other games, there was a point where I chose not to Mystical Tutor for a piece of interaction in response to my Crom Trigger because I had 3 pieces of interaction in hand and the Mystical Tutor was the only gas. So I'm thinking somebody's going for a win attempt here. I have 3 ways to stop it. I'm going to hold off on that Mystical Tutor and use it to somehow put together a win on my turn. And they had 4 pieces of interaction. They went March of Swirling Mist, I think Fierce Guardianship, Flusterstorm, Swansong. And I was just like, okay, I guess triple protection doesn't work. And I look at the rest of my pod and, they don't have any interaction whatsoever. So I was like, surely between my 3 pieces and this, I could put something together. But No, it just didn't. And I think still analyzing that game, there's not a world where I'm thinking, you know what? I have to mystical tutor for the fourth piece of interaction. Like I don't think that was the play. I think should feel pretty safe in that spot. My hand was basically just interaction and mystical tutor. So I'm also thinking just like if I use this mystical tutor for the fourth piece, what the heck do I do in this game? So that was like, sure, if I'd done that, I'm probably likely to win that game. But also, I don't think without perfect information I ever make that play. So I didn't feel too bad about that one. And then the other games were kind of like having to push and it not really working, or because again, trying to be reactive just isn't working. So for the most part, there's nothing that sticks out that was just like, I really messed that up. I think I might have tutored something that was kind of weird with a Yasharn in play at one point. But that game was just like rapidly going out of my hands. With like there was like Yasharn that was protected by both Sylvan Safekeeper and Shalai. So it's just like that board, that Yasharn is never leaving this board state. So I'm never going to get to breach. So that was just kind of awkward. And then there was like the threat of an Archon of Emeria. So I was just like, if that hits, I can't do anything. So I had to push that turn and it just couldn't quite line up. But for the most part, I feel like I played okay. I think obviously there may be games I could have mulliganed slightly differently. I think for the most part I tried to keep those hands though that were like reactive enough, proactive enough, kind of got to do what the deck wanted to do. And it just didn't really line up very well in those pods. Like you said, like Tymna was never good in any of those games that I played, period. I think even if I had started with Tymna in play, it wouldn't have been especially good in those games because there were just really fast games where I didn't get to, attack freely. Draw engines were just a little too slow, drawing blind cards, and it just didn't work. And I really regretted not bringing Rogsai. I had Rog with me, and when I entered Redemption, I played Rogsai, and it went really well. I just absolutely bodied people for the 2 wins I got, and then we got a draw for one of the other ones. That was like a guaranteed draw because there were 2 Wandering Archaics in play. So no one could win and try to protect it, or it just completely stopped the game from getting that happen. So yeah, I wish I just stuck with my guns and played the deck I prepared more, and that would have ended up better in the Swiss. But again, like I expected, like the typical Swiss you hear of is like a lot of dirtily stacked decks. Like everybody who owns a collector oof showing up to play in the Swiss. Every Golgari pile you've never seen. But like there was like not a lot of Tayam at the pot. Like Tayam was like the sack deck you'd expect, and there wasn't much of that at the event, I don't think.
Just one.
Yeah, one Tayam player who I knew was coming there with Tayam. There was another upstate South Carolina player. I think Shalai or Yasharn was the only stacks piece I ever saw resolved or even like cast in the pod or in any of my pods. Going in for the like safer stable deck didn't line up well for me. And then also like, I wouldn't say I was uncomfortable with Blue Farm, but I did have less experience on it than Rogsai. But also keep in mind, I'm going into this event like by the end of day 1, it had added to just the massive losing streak I had in my prep games. Like my prep games were going so horribly. And then by the end of day 1, I'm like 0-5. And I'm just like, wow, I've lost like 25 games of Magic in a row. Why am I even doing Magic anymore?
But to be fair, that's going to happen to people. It's just, it's part of the game.
And again, that came after a huge hot streak where like I was tracking all my games and was at like 60% across a whole bunch of different decks, super high win rate on Rogsai. And then just like, boom, absolutely getting demolished in the street. I played like 5 stream games in a row where I went 4th, and in Mox Masters I went 4th most of my games, and I was just like, I hate Magic. But that just happens.
You got to see how that is, because like some of the people you played against, like in some of those streams, they didn't do so hot in the tournament. So they were playing objectively a powerful deck as well. So it's one of those things of like I really take this to heart. Practicing, yes, you want to win, and it's great to win, but if you're not learning from your wins, you're really missing out. So like the losses really teach you a lot of things. And I thought the lesson from my losses was like, wow, Rogsai can suck sometimes, but because I'm really trying to promote that idea as well of like, what's the goal of our prep games? It's not to win our prep games. It's to do well in the event or get better, But when I'm losing that many of them, I'm like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but clearly I'm doing something wrong. And so like, I think in that scenario, it can be easy to just take to think and be like me and just like, I'm going to swap decks, right before. And I think a lot of that was
I feel like if I went into the event off the back of that many losses with that deck, I would have felt really uncomfortable in the pods until like I got just like if I had just came out, turn, game one, got a win, then it probably would have recovered. But like I feel like I would have been pretty low confidence going in off the back of like, yeah, I've lost my past 15 games. I don't even know what winning a game of Magic looks like anymore.
Yeah, and for the record, like Rogside, like there were two Rogside decks in 17th and 18th. So, and they were 3-3-1. So they had enough points to top 16. Tiebreakers happen. Sometimes it happens in people's favors. We saw with Brian Koval. He went on to make the most of it, and then it didn't work out for Bryant Cook and another player in this event. So I would just, for those who want to look at like what didn't top 16, what top 16, I would just take a deeper dive into more so maybe like, I mean, it's a 160 player tournament and all 160 players were there. Like I would take a deep dive if a deck got at least like probably like 2 wins or so, and look at where and like when they lost. Did they lose the last round when they shouldn't have been playing? Probably. Whatever. I wouldn't even look at that. That deck went 2-4, so that deck won like, that deck still did pretty decent. So I would just kind of take a deep dive and like look at the deck list and just look at, what people are playing and just not like get too much into the whole like, oh, this deck didn't top 16 and get overreactive for it. Like I don't know. I don't like those because all these decks have the ability to like adjust to the meta too. If you really wanted to, like, if you're on Rock side and you feel like you just need a little bit extra, you could go Toxic Deluge or Mountain Doom. Like if you really wanted to, like without really giving up. And Mountain Doom is like probably like the freest slot because you're not really giving up anything for it.
Yeah.
And you have a ton of, and you have like the requisite like legendary artifacts in your deck, and it's virtually almost free. So I think also like maybe like a really like some type of like, what is the Jessica? Jessica would be I think probably a good commander to bring into it. But I'll be honest with you, like Fire Covenant was absolute dog duty for me. Like I never saw it, nor did I need it. Like I just really thought I had to have 2 sweepers in this event, and Fire Covenant not being like, it's not like a modal spell like Damn, where Damn's 2 mana to 4. It's just 3 mana kind of do the thing. Like I just felt like I just didn't need it because, and it just never came up. It was never relevant because it's also part of what the deck that I'm playing. So like my game might be over a little bit faster than another deck's because I'm not Blue Farm. So having like a card like that just like kind of breaks the game like wide open, particularly like while it's still a really good card. I also don't want to be in those scenarios where I have to utilize a card like that. And that's still a good card. I think it's totally fine to run, but I would just rather have more action and more payoffs in that slot. That was just kind of my lesson of that event. I try to make my deck as like idiot proof as possible. Like I try not to get fancy with my mana or anything like that. And the mana was great. 26 lands was perfect. I had no issues with that. Like, people get really scared when they see those low land counts, but it was totally fine. It was just good. I ran basically all the good rocks and just the good dorks and stuff. And then just made a couple adjustments to my list. As much as people hate Wheel of Misfortune, I really wish I had a second wheel, mostly for those like low mulligan hands where I like mulligan to 5. Still did really good. Played a turn 2 Dockside off mull to 5. Had like I had land Soul Ring Talisman, which was awesome. Turn 2 Finale Devastation. But at the same time, like having a wheel there is just so good. And just having those, if you want to see how a wheel be good, you watch round 5 of the feature match. I think Bryant Cook's on the play. But I watched it basically go land, crypt, windfall. And that game wasn't even close after that. So
yeah,
print another Wheel Wizards, please. I need one.
My redemption game, my first one of getting to go, like once I got rid of this stupid Chalice of the Void that stopped my first 2 turns from happening, and just being able to dump my entire hand, Time Twister, throw out some more. I think I went like ended on like a Remora, pass the turn, draw some cards, jam everything that I drew, everything that got countered or didn't work. Like it was like gamble for Nas, discarded the Nas. Oh well, cast a Ristic that got countered. Okay, cast a Wheel of Misfortune, resolves, pay 25 life. Everybody at the table looking at me like I'm a lunatic. Win the game that same turn because I have more cards and more mana than y'all. I'm gonna take advantage of it while I can. I will definitely say by the end of day 1, when I was hearing about redemption, I was like, you can switch, and hearing you like, oh, you can switch decks. And I had like the change in my mind of like, okay, well, I've been playing in these games. I feel like if I played these games and was like, I went in with Blue Farm relying on the deck to be like, I'm going to get more cards than my opponent. Eventually I'll win. And instead of swapping to Roxai, I was really confident, just being like, okay, in all of these pods, if I had been the one applying the pressure and picking the spots where to go for it and doing the mulligans and like where that's the important thing, I feel like I would do really well. And so I felt actually pretty confident going with Roxai and just saying like, I'm going to call the shots, and I feel comfortable like going through lines with this deck, piecing together wins, knowing what to tutor for. And we're just gonna hope that comfort level and like also understanding of these games are fast and not incredibly interactive. I felt really good going into like that side event with Roxai. And I definitely wish I went to the main event with Roxai. Can't say definitively I would have just like, oh, I would have top 16 if I had only played Roxai, but like I definitely would have liked the spot I was in, and I would have probably felt maybe a little less dumb swapping like swapping decks last minute and not doing incredibly well with the deck. And also like if I had swapped decks last minute and swapped to Corvold, that would have been respectable. Or, something like that. But like swapping last minute and going to Blue Farm is just like, what am I doing here? That's lame.
Like, oh man, it's just one of those things of like, if somebody asked me, they go, would you play Corvold again? I was like, oh, absolutely, 1,000%. The way the game's played today, I did the deck a disservice by not playing like more aggressive. And that's with like jamming like turn 3 wins or turn 3 ad nauseums and those type of things. Like I should have just been pressure, pressure, pressure. Like, and that's what I wish I would have done a little bit more. And again, those like small micro decisions really, really matter. And just I think getting more tournament games under my belt and just kind of like I think we rely on our experiences way too much of like, oh, well, I remember this time that I had this kind of like slow hand and it kind of resembles this and it's a similar game. I'll keep it. And even though it looks respectable, you just die to a turn 2, like, Thoracle combo. And typically there's nothing I could do about that type of stuff, right? Like I guess I could have Pyro Red Elemental Blast in those, but I should just basically look for a turn 2 Nas, a turn 2 Dockside that has like a payoff. Like that's pretty much what I should do every game. And then in those games where you do have a legitimate pivot plan, where you also have, that's the one thing that frustrates me. Everybody's like, oh, you just pivot. That's so dumb.
That's so blue player of you.
I'm sorry if that offends anybody, but like, I really hate the whole like, just pivot. Like, yeah, you're right. I'm just going to magically form these cards in my hand. Like, pivoting is when somebody has typically a line with the resources, the requisite resources to pivot. And decks can do that. Like, like that's just, it's so much easier. So just mulligan for this. It'll appear. Just mulligan for Mana Crypt. It's like, yeah, I can try, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen. It's a little bit easier than said than done. But yeah, like, again, the only mulligan decision I think I just wish I did differently was in terms of like, or not a mulligan, but just a tutor target was match 2. I should have just went for the One Ring opposed to Dockside. And then without saying who would have won or lost that game, but I promise you it wouldn't have been the Thrasios Dawnwaker person, because that game would have been completely different. I would have probably still got ultra pressured by Tivit, but that's okay, because I would have drawn a lot of cards and had Curse Mirror. So that would have been just fine for me. And that's another thing too. I want to say like about like the One Ring, like it just allows you to just, I don't know. I don't want to get too much in the One Ring. It's a good card. If your deck can play it and it doesn't affect your game plan and it's just a good draw engine, play that card. And don't tell me blue decks, you fast blue decks out there. And you know who I'm talking about. It's like, oh, what's the what? It's not that good. It's like, yeah, but not every deck has Ristic and Mystic in it. Like decks have to play with the tools that they have, So get over yourselves.
And in regards to like good cards performing well, I also want to say that every time, I guess other than when I cast it and to an opponent who yet again, like my opponents just seem to have the nuts. Like I went to Bowmaster, somebody doing Thrasios Infinite draws. They had the SWAT in their hand and just pinged it with my own Bowmaster trick. Like they just had it all. But when other people resolve Orcish Bowmasters, not that I'm salty about this, but just saying that I kept seeing it do incredibly well. Like I saw Bowmasters do really well and get huge and like kill players. Like Bowmasters seem to be quite good even in like this very proactive sort of environment. Again, if a game gets slow, Bowmaster's good. If somebody's going and like jamming wheels, Bowmaster's good. there's not really a point in the game that it's not a good card. I feel like there aren't a lot of black decks that I think are gonna shy away from it. I think it is really that good.
The last round 5 of day 1. I was just like finishing up my match, one on turn 2 on that one. That one was pretty sick. Anyways, I just like looked over and I think Alano's just like had this massive Orcish Bowmaster token and was just like felt like it was dominating the game and just took it over with like an extra turn effect and just basically ended the game out like that. So
This video is brought to you by Card Trader. Card Trader Zero is a service that lets you buy cards from all over the world with no extra shipping fees. Cards are sent to Card Trader to verify, and they'll keep them until you're ready to get them all at once with a single shipping fee. Register at the link in the description below to get $2 just for signing up.
And again, I want to say like we're not doing like a deep dive into the top 16 and the winner and all the decks or whatever, mainly because like I don't think that is an event, right? Like we wanted to really talk about what the event was like, what being there was like, why you should think about attending one of these events, and like looking at like the records of certain decks or whatever. I don't think that matters as much, and even like looking at the record of people isn't like super relevant. I feel like Comedian did not top 16 this event. Does that mean he's not a good Magic player or not a good cEDH player anymore? Of freaking course not. And also like if you were at the event and you didn't do very well, if you don't make it to a lot of events, it might feel like me personally, this is my first event. I don't get to make it to a lot of events. So I wanted to do well. I didn't necessarily. Does that sample size of 1 mean that I shouldn't play cEDH anymore, or really bad? Or you shouldn't take that from an event. Like if you do enter one, these are hard to begin with. These are hard for the people who do this all the time. And if you're doing it once every 6 months, once a year, and you don't do well in it, that you shouldn't be that surprised or you shouldn't be that upset by and really beat yourself up over it, because it's a game that you play. It's very hard. It's honestly very random also. And the experience of going to one of these events, I think, is the part you should strive for more than like going in and taking it down.
nothing was more satisfying is when I got my first win, not because I won, but because people were legitimately happy.
Yeah.
Like they were like, "Oh, did you get that win? Oh, that is so awesome." This community is a community-based first format, and having a good healthy community despite anybody in the community having personal differences with each other, whether it's online jargon or Discord trash or whatever. I don't care about all that. But when you're in person, you can put those differences aside and legitimately just come as one. You don't have to be best friends, but you can be very happy that we have the ability to get together and enjoy this niche format. Commander is no longer niche. Like Commander is Commander. It is the format,
Yeah.
and cEDH is a niche of that format. It's a lot of Commander players, a lot of Commander tournaments now, thanks to Eminence. And you know, in joking aside, they very much have influenced the health and growth of cEDH and allowed players like myself, Matt, everybody else that was there to have a higher powered level form of commander. And I think that is really important. And, also, how sweet is the EDH top 16 software? You know what I'm
Mm.
saying? Like, that is legitimately like probably like one of the biggest revelations from like a tool that this community has versus like looking at Oswald, 3,000 Oswald Fiddlebender decks, that
Mm.
are cEDH, whatever. So I just want to say first and foremost, that's a big from a player to go to that type of event because it's been since COVID since I've got to play like a big tournament level. Like I played like a 64 man like local event and it felt like a local. But like in this regard, as while the experience was great as a large event, it felt very comfortable. Like
Mm.
and it might be a little bit different because me and Matt are kind of like God, I'm gonna say this. It's like we're like faux famous, like internet
Yeah.
whatever famous. Like 5 people knew who we were. No, it was actually quite a bit more than that. It was a little bit more experience. Once I actually talked, people recognized my voice more so because I looked like just like another guy, I guess.
Mm.
But when I rolled the playmat out, it was a little bit different because I had a Mad King playmat, and then that kind of skewed. Maybe I should do that. Locked in on me because they knew what my deck did,
Mm.
and I was like, it's Corvold, like surprise.
Not a lot to hide.
Yeah, the food chain was a shocker though, and some of the like spells and like that I chose was like the curse mirror, the heat shimmer, those kind of things.
Yeah, it's just cool to get to connect to people that you relate to. Like you were talking about, like people always say, like micro internet celebrities or niche internet celebrities or whatever. Like getting to relate to people over those little things, even if it's not like us being recognized, but just being like grouping up with people, and be like, oh, that's them from this. Oh, that's them from this, and just having like that niche thing we all connect on in CDH. That's just like, you if you go to work and you talk to the people you work with about, the things you like, odds are you can't just be like, yeah, I'm a CDH player, and they know what you mean. Like being able to just like be surrounded with people who know that and have like those moments. There's a really funny one that happened where the head judge is answering questions at the beginning of day one at the end of the player meeting, and somebody asks, what if my opponent is taking a lot of game actions, which takes a lot of time? They're resolving an ad nauseum. They do a big combo turn, and they just take up a ton of the time on the clock. And the head judge just says, "Welcome to CDH," and it's just like everybody applauds, and it's just like this dumb moment of just like, "Yep, that's us. That's the thing we do. That's what we choose to spend our weekend doing." And it was just really really awesome, really really cool event, really awesome to get to do that stuff. Cool moments.
Also, shout out to Phil Gallagher, Thraven U, for hooking me up some sweet tokens. That's just really cool. Really great job taking care of your fans. Also, a big fan of their podcasts, Eternal Glory and the Epic Storm, not sponsored at all. So,
Not yet.
not
Please,
yet.
Bryant Cook, Phil Gallagher, Bosch Roll,
Use
anybody.
your Brian, use your Epic Storm money over
Yeah,
here.
we could use it. I'll
I'm
let you.
joking.
I'll let Phil Gallagher come back on my stream and be to sell up with Tivit again. More than willing to take that L.
No, and that's the best part is like it was just like I said, it was just a good way to get back into it. And then like I've already got a couple events lined up for the rest of the year. I'm really excited to see what like Eminence has in store. I know they told us some stuff that they're going to be doing. I don't want to say on air because I don't know if that's public information yet, but I'm just excited to see what we got going. So
And I think that about covers it for this one. If you guys are interested in more of like a detailed breakdown, any other sort of like thing you'd like to hear post event or any kind of event coverage that we do, just let us know in the comments. If you wanted a little bit less of the on the ground experience and more of just like an overview of what the decks were, I'm sure there will be videos like that, but it also might be something that we're interested in doing if there's a lot of you who want to hear it. Other than that, as always, let us know down below what you liked about this episode, what you did, what you want to hear from next. We kind of are wide open until we got a little bit until the next quarterly report. We just went to this event and I don't have anything else lined up soon. So like in terms of episodes, it's pretty open to what people are wanting to hear from us.
yeah, I wouldn't be shocked of us covering Surfside because Surfside's literally this weekend, I believe. Which is not I don't think quite as big as this event, but still pretty large.
Mhm.
So I was gonna go to that one, but I just couldn't factor the timing and there's a
Yeah.
lot. And I got something for jury duty this month, so that's fun. I actually found out on the drive to Atlanta.
But yeah, thank you again to all my patrons. Check out the merch down in the description below. There should be some new stuff coming soon. I got some ideas for things I want to work on. So let me know what you'd like to see. And again, any other video ideas, episodes we do here, little comments, questions, let us know. But other than that, this has been Learning cEDH. Have a good one.